Good morning, Pullen. We greet you and this day with the words of Mary Oliver's this morning. This morning, the red bird's eggs have hatched, and already the chicks are chirping for food. They don't know where it's coming from. They just keep shouting, more, more. As to anything else, they haven't had a single thought. Their eyes haven't yet opened. They know nothing about the sky that's waiting, or the thousands, the millions of trees. They don't even know they have wings. And just like that, like a simple neighborhood event, a miracle is taking place. We now celebrate the miracle of this morning that we share together. We come now to our time of prayer. I heard there was an earthquake last night or this morning. I think everybody's okay. God be praised, so we give thanks for that. We want to lift in prayer the following. Pam Knight's mother, Vernie Ellis, was hospitalized this week for high blood pressure, and it was discovered during that hospitalization that she has ovarian cancer. And so Pam requests your prayers for her mom and for her family. Fannie Memory Mitchell, a longtime member of Pullen, and Frank Farmer's aunt, recently suffered a fall. She was hospitalized briefly to monitor her condition, and she's back in her apartment at Whitaker Glen receiving extended care there. She's not now receiving calls or able to receive calls or visits, but welcomes other written communication. We are lifting up in prayer again this week. Oppie Jordan, her brother-in-law, Ray Wheatcraft, died, and Oppie is in Wilmington with her family this weekend. We are in prayer for Lucy Daniels, whose first cousin, Edgar Foster Daniels, died on July 31st in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He will be laid to rest here in Raleigh. We continue to pray for the people of Beirut, Lebanon, as they deal with grief and anger in the wake of this week's explosion. Last Sunday, we prayed for Manal, who had visited us during her time here in the States, and she was headed back to Lebanon. And we continue to pray for her as she lost a friend in the blast, and reports that many people, including herself, have been triggered by this event. Let us continue in prayer. God, we give thanks for allowing us to see the dawning of a new day, for it is a day that we have never seen before, and a day that we will never see again. And so may we cherish it, may we find joy in it, and may we fulfill purpose in it, may we rest in it. God, our concerns are many, many more even than those that were named this morning. We offer them so that we might bear this burden together, all of us, that someone might take up the weight that I am no longer able to carry, and that I might shoulder the load that has become too burdensome for someone else, and that you would do exceedingly abundantly beyond anything we can ask or think. We hope in that because we've seen you do it before. Bring order out of chaos, and bring life to things long dead, turn mourning into dancing, humble the haughty, elevate the lowly. So may we walk together and never get so weary or discouraged that we fail to hold up the light of hope. And we pray that hope would shine in the darkness and transform it. Amen. This morning's scripture reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When my way grows drear, Darkness appears and the night draws near, and the day is past and gone. At the river I stand, guide my feet, hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
I grew up with a mother who feared the water. Her fear was deep, and unlike some fears, this one was squarely rooted in fact. She could not and cannot swim. As a child, I watched her almost drown on 2 different occasions, once at the beach and another time at a swimming pool, when a child pushed her in the water unaware that she couldn't swim. So because of her fear and having never learned to swim, she was determined that her 2 children would learn how to swim. Enter into the cast of characters Dr. Robert Bob Blackburn, Chairman of the Health and Physical Education Department at Gardner-Webb University. Dr. Blackburn, who died last year at the age of 86, was known as the best swim teacher in all of Cleveland County. One line even in his obituary read this: while at Gardner-Webb, he was the chairman of the Health and Physical Education Department and taught thousands of children to swim at the GW pool. My sister and I were 2 of those thousands of children he taught to swim. Our mother started us with lessons at an early age, and every summer we took swimming lessons with Dr. Blackburn until we were well into our teenage years, even progressing to the life-saving classes. Here's what I remember about those lessons, the early years and the latter years. First, Dr. Blackburn was the first man I ever saw wearing a Speedo swimsuit. And I'll just leave that there. Second, Dr. Blackburn was a friendly man, and he meant serious business when it came to swimming lessons. He was kind but firm. He could be playful but was always serious. He was generous but had very high expectations of his students. He knew just the moment to jump in and help and how long to wait to let a student struggle. As a child of a parent who couldn't swim, I too had a healthy respect for the water. Swimming and swimming pools and going swimming was not a familiar activity to me as a very, very young child. So when I started swim lessons with Dr. Blackburn, I could quickly get myself worked up to a place of great fear on the 10-mile drive from my home to the Gardner Webb pool. Even now, I can recall how scared I felt as I walked into that unfamiliar place with unfamiliar faces to learn to do something that felt even more unfamiliar, all as a young child. And just as an aside here, back then, swim lessons weren't for parents and children. There were no parents and toddler classes like today. As a matter of fact, parents weren't allowed to even watch the swim lessons. Nope. We were on our own with Dr. Blackburn. I remember the early years of paddling my legs as fast as I could while holding on to that blue foam board that was used with beginners. I would wait to hear Dr. Blackburn's voice call out, "Good job, Nancy, good job." It was what every child longed to hear him say, and he knew it. He was generous with every child, giving each of us the affirmation we longed for so that we would try even harder. I remember learning from Dr. Blackburn how to put my face into the water and hold my breath. Later progressing to learning how to turn my head to breathe while continuing to swim, and then learning the backstroke and the side stroke and the butterfly stroke, all movements that at first felt so unfamiliar and awkward, but seemed so easy for Dr. Blackburn. I remember vividly the latter years when my class finally progressed to the deep end of the pool in those life-saving classes, and Dr. Blackburn taught us how to tread water for long, long periods of time. I remember times when the only thing sticking out of the water were my lips as I struggled to keep my head above the water, with Dr. Blackburn instructing me, "Keep treading, Nancy, keep treading." It seemed he always knew the exact moment when it was time for him to call me in, but not a second before. These memories of the fear of water and all the unfamiliar things associated with swimming pools and swimming lessons came back to me as I reflected on the story of Jesus and the disciples on the water in Matthew 14, and especially the disciples' reaction to seeing Jesus walk on the water. From my own experience, I can understand the disciples' fear of something so unfamiliar. The gospel writer describes the scene this way. He writes, "When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the sea, on the water, they were terrified." I know what it is like, even as and especially as a child, to fear something unfamiliar, to be terrified by something you've never seen or done. Nothing about standing on the side of that pool with that blue foam board in my hand and being told to jump into the water was familiar to me. Fear, full of fear, heart pounding. I can still hear Dr. Blackburn saying to me, "Jump, Nancy, jump." He might as well have been saying, "Walk on water, Nancy. Walk on the water." How long I must have stood with my little toes clinging to the edge, half bent over, clutching that foam board, scared to death, before I finally jumped. I was terrified. The unfamiliar has a way of evoking fear within us. I don't have to go all the way back to my swim lessons as a child to get in touch with this truth. Fearing the unfamiliar, or as some would call it, fearing the unknown, is a human trait that all of us carry within us in one way or another. Fear of dying, fear of flying, fear of certain insects, fear of the future, fear of people, fear of crowds, fear of small places, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of disease, fear of life itself. The list is endless. Have you ever wondered how fear gets instilled in us so early in life? Monsters under the bed or hiding in the closet. Friends not liking us at school, starting something new like a school year and struggling, trying new food that is unfamiliar, swimming lessons. What if instead of stoking fear in our lives, we cultivated curiosity? Yes, I know what you're thinking, that old adage, curiosity is what killed the cat. But I think after a full analysis, we would come to the conclusion that curiosity is healthier than fear. For fear holds us back. Curiosity leans us forward. Fear paralyzes us and freezes us, and curiosity releases us and pricks our imaginations. It is my own assessment, and I don't think I'm alone in it, that we are living in a fear-based culture right now. We, like those disciples, are seeing a lot of things that are unfamiliar walking toward us, and we are terrified. We see a new generation of young leaders emerging, suggesting ideas and ideals that are unfamiliar, and we fear for the future. We are experiencing how a global pandemic can turn our world upside down and inside out, leaving us facing so much that is unfamiliar. And what we do is we fear that life will never be normal again. We witness TV ads that are created to instill fear in us. If someone suggests police reform. Have you seen these ads that come out this week? President Donald Trump's campaign released an ad on Thursday on what it would be like if the police were defunded. A phone rings and an answering service responds in the ad. And this is what you hear. You have reached the 911 police emergency line. Due to defunding of the police department, we're sorry, but no one here can take your call. If you're calling to report a rape, please press 1. To report a murder, press 2. To report a home invasion, press 3. For all other crimes, leave your name and number, and someone will get back to you. Our estimated wait time is currently 5 days. Goodbye. Fear-mongering. It is nothing short of shameful. Creating images that instill fear in the minds and imaginations of those watching, while the truth is that very few people are talking about completely defunding the police. Many, however, are talking about police reform. But when the unfamiliar comes walking across the water, for so many of us, there is terror, not curiosity. And that, my friends, is a crisis that we are facing in our nation, in our institutions. And the church is not excluded. We, too, are apt to peddle fear. Based in fear. And based on fear, we are holding so tight onto familiar systems and institutions that are unjust, all because we are terrified of the unfamiliar. And yet, as people of faith, we are told over and over again and again in our faith narrative, do not fear. In its various forms, do not fear, do not be afraid, fear not. It is the most frequent command in all of our sacred scriptures. And here in Matthew 14, we hear Jesus saying it again to his disciples. Take heart, it is I. Do not fear. Do not be afraid. This exchange with Jesus and the disciples made me wonder how many times Jesus comes to us in the unfamiliar and in unfamiliar ways, and we are so fearful and terrified that we fail to recognize him. We miss the embodiment of God because we are blinded by fear rather than awakened to curiosity. And so I wonder, what insights might we gain if we started looking at the year 2020 and all that has been unfamiliar and unsettling about this year through the lens of curiosity rather than fear? What if we become curious about the future of education and schooling rather than fearful about it? What if we became curious about how to be the church when we can't gather all in one place because of a global pandemic, and instead of being fearful about that and how it erodes our time away from one another, how might we be curious about how to do church in new ways? What if we became curious about how to achieve economic equality rather than looking at things with the fearful eye of economic collapse? What if we became curious, as people of faith, what if we became curious about how as a nation to achieve racial equity rather than maintaining a culture of white supremacy that is nothing more than a culture based in fear and violence? What if we become curious about reforming our criminal justice system instead of living in fear and being a nation that incarcerates more people than any other civilized nation? Yes, it is time, my friends. It is time as individuals and as a nation to have the courage to open our eyes to the unfamiliar and free ourselves from the fear that has us all locked up in prisons. It is time, if you will, to baptize our fear chalice and wash it anew with curiosity. I wonder how my swim lessons with Dr. Blackburn could have felt different if curiosity rather than fear had been the narrative on which I stood at the edge of that pool and heard Dr. Blackburn call out to me, "Jump, Nancy, jump." This story in Matthew 14 continues with one brave disciple's response to Jesus. It only takes one. Peter says to Jesus, "If it is you, Jesus, command me to come to you on the water." Peter, out of curiosity, took that first step out of the boat, what was safe and what was familiar. And he stepped onto the water and he started walking toward Jesus, toward justice, toward love, toward mercy, toward compassion. And for a moment, he set his fear aside and was free to walk toward Jesus. But it wasn't long before the wind blew, and Peter got a little afraid again. And in his fear, he began to sink and panic. And the story tells us that at that moment, when the fear returned in Peter, Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. And therein lies the lesson on how to walk on water. We have to trust that when we step out of the familiar and face our fears, there will be a hand reaching out to us to catch us. But if we never take that first step, if we never move our minds and hearts and bodies from what is familiar, from our prejudices and our biases, from our safety and security, from our own interest, if we never take that first step from those familiar places and walk with curiosity into the unfamiliar, we may never experience the hand of God reaching out to us to catch us. Instead, we will stay firmly planted in our fear, terrified, all the while missing the embodiment of God's presence in us and among us. In those early swim lessons, every time Dr. Blackburn said, "Jump, Nancy, jump," I had to believe that he would be there to catch me if I needed him. I had to let go of my fear and trust that he would indeed catch me. Here's what I think. I think God needs people in the world today who are willing to set their fears aside and in a spirit of curiosity take a risk to walk on water toward what is unfamiliar and unknown and very likely the embodiment of God's Spirit calling out to us. And then, like Peter, when the strong winds blow and we get afraid again, we trust that if we need a hand to catch us, God will be there, reaching out to us, holding us. And if God can do that for us, can we imagine doing it for one another? Is that not what it means to be the kingdom of God here on this earth? To set our fear and fears aside and to reach out to one another to make this world a better place? I think so. And so I think God needs more of us to learn how to walk on water. Reach out and touch somebody's hand because somebody needs your hand.
Reach out and touch somebody's hand. little kindness you'll see. It's something that comes very naturally. Just try. We can change things if we start giving. Why don't you reach out and touch somebody's hand? Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can.
Reach out and touch. There's so many ways that we can reach out and touch. I was talking with a friend the other day, a member of this church, and she said she had had this aha moment. And the aha moment was this: we're not any longer trying to ride out a pandemic. The pandemic is here. We're living in an unfamiliar time, and we have to go on living. We still have to be safe. We have to respect all the guidelines of what that means, of washing our hands and wearing our face mask and keeping social distance and all of those things. But we can't stop living. We can't stop being the hand that reaches out to another who needs catching. And this is one thing that I am sure of, Shalise. I am sure that if we set aside our fears, our biases, our prejudices, all the things that we're terrified of, that's keeping us from living into being the beloved community of God, I am quite confident that when the strong winds blow and that fear creeps up in us just a little bit again, God will be there to reach out God's hand to catch us. God will not let us drown when we seek justice, when we love compassion, and when we walk humbly. So my friends, free yourself. Free yourself from whatever is holding you in a familiar place that is no longer healthy, and reach out. Allow God to touch you, and you touch someone else. Reach out and touch somebody and make this world a better place.